Don't worry. Brandon's mom will watch the 17 kids. She's used to it. No need to hire anyone. My future daughter-in-law said, sweet as sugar melting into coffee, turning to smile at her sister while I kneading dough in the kitchen stood just one curtain away. I had spent 3 months preparing for my son's wedding, cooking, decorating, and paying more than $3,000 out of my retirement, only because I wanted his day to be beautiful. And now here they were, discussing how to use me like a free babysitter, a convenient tool no one needed to ask. They even laughed. Saves money and keeps her busy so she won't butt into adult business. I didn't cry. I quietly wiped my hands, opened the safe, pulled out all the catering and floral contracts, and set them on the table. If my kindness was going to be treated like an obligation, then tomorrow morning they would get a special gift. The first lesson in respect. If you're still listening, tell me where you're watching from. Every comment you leave is another mark in this journey. And if this story has touched you, don't forget to hit like so it can reach even further. My name is Sandra Whitmore, 69, widowed 15 years. I live alone in a small house in the suburbs of Portland, Oregon, the place that used to echo with the laughter of my son, Brandon, when he was a blonde little boy who preferred mud to homework. I once thought my old age would be peaceful gardening, baking, and watching my son happy with the woman he loves. When Brandon introduced Lila, I believed it would come true. She was young, gentle, well-spoken, always calling me Mom Sandra, bringing flowers every visit, and never forgetting to compliment my pies. Marcus may be lucky, but I'm luckier to have you, Mom Sandra, she once said in a syrupy tone that I actually believed. For 2 years I treated Lila like my own daughter. I shared heirloom recipes, gave her keepsakes from when my husband was alive, and helped them save thousands of dollars on the wedding by taking on the entire buffet. I thought that was how to show love, that I was still useful, that kindness was the only thing I knew how to give. But that afternoon, just 1 week before the wedding, everything changed. I still remember the smell of vanilla in the kitchen, the late-day light through the window, and the giggles on the porch. At first, I caught a few broken phrases. Then, when I heard my name, I stopped. Just let Brandon's mom handle the kids. She loves them. Nice, her sister Paige replied. That means no need to hire anyone, big savings. Yep, and convenient. She'll be busy and won't butt into adult conversations. With that kind of mother-in-law, just keep her occupied and you're done. They both laughed. That laughter slid straight into my chest, cold and hollow. I looked down at my hands, dusty with flour, cracked and trembling. These hands raised Brandon, held my husband's in his final days, and now they were being treated like free tools for others to exploit. I stepped out of the kitchen and climbed the stairs slowly. My heart pounded, but my head was crystal clear. No rage, no tears, just a quiet decision taking shape. If they saw me as hired help, I would stop playing the perfect mother they were used to using. In my bedroom, I opened the oak drawer where I kept every invoice and contract, food suppliers, the florist, the decor company, the wedding cake deposit. I totaled it quickly, more than $3,200, a year of retirement savings. I photographed each page, saved them on my phone, then tucked everything into an envelope labeled Evidence, Respect. When I returned to the kitchen, I heard the porch door close. They were gone. Silence settled over the house, broken only by the ticking clock. I stared at the dress draped over the chair, the coral dress I planned to wear to the wedding. I smoothed the fabric and told myself, no, they don't deserve to see me in it. That night, I called Carmen, my best friend of over 40 years, the one who knows me best. Carmen, I need help, I said. Surprisingly calm. What is it, San? You sound like you're about to start a storm. I told her everything, the conversation, the snide remarks, and the feeling of being turned into the babysitter of the century. Carmen paused, then burst out. Good grief, Sandra. They forgot you don't just cook, you strategize. So, what's the plan? I smiled. The plan is to let them taste the consequences. The next morning, I brewed coffee, opened my vendor list, and started calling. Hello, this is Sandra Whitmore. I need to cancel the buffet order for the 18th. Ma'am, with only a few days left, there will be a cancellation fee. I understand. Charge the card. I'm not changing my mind. One by one, I called all four: food, bakery, flowers, decor. Each call ended with the same feeling: relief. I stacked the papers neatly, placed them on the table with the penalty envelopes. Every dollar forfeited bought back a piece of my self-respect. Then I opened my laptop and booked a night train to a seaside spa at Cannon Beach, the place my husband and I dreamed of but never got to visit. I would go for 2 days and take only 3 things: a few outfits, my favorite book, and a small voice recorder in my coat pocket in case they tried to deny what they'd said. In the afternoon, Brandon stopped by with a tired smile. "Mom, everything okay? You've been quiet these days." "All good, honey," I answered, light as a breeze. "Everything is being taken care of. I'm glad you always help us. Lila says you're the best person in the world." I pressed my lips into a smile and said nothing. I used to believe that. After Brandon left, I took off the apron hanging in the kitchen, folded it carefully, and put it in the drawer. That simple, decisive motion felt like closing the curtain on a role I'd been playing my entire life. Late that night, I wrote a letter. "Dear Brandon and Lila, by the time you read this, I'll be resting somewhere peaceful by the ocean. For the past 3 months, I've tried to help make your wedding perfect, but today I realized I may no longer be needed in that role. I won't attend the reception. I won't cook the buffet or babysit for anyone. I've canceled what I prepared. I trust you'll find another more fitting way to begin your life together. With love and with dignity, Mom." I folded the letter and set it in the center of the dining table where I had planned to lay out my best dishes. The lamplight warmed the paper, making my signature glow. I looked around the kitchen, tidy, quiet, scented with cinnamon. Nothing left to regret. At midnight, I rolled my suitcase to the door and locked it with a trembling hand. Not from fear, but because for the first time in years, I was choosing myself. The taxi carried me through a light mist. The city slept, its lights blinking on the windshield. In the rear view, my reflection looked hazy, the agreeable woman now preparing to turn her absence into the strongest protest. And the next morning, when they woke to begin their big day, the only thing they would see on the banquet table was a letter and the empty space where gratitude used to live. The next morning I woke earlier than usual. Dim light spilled through the window onto the envelopes I had lined up on the dining table, bills, receipts, and the letter I'd left behind. The little house was strangely quiet. No mixer whirring, no smell of brewing coffee, just me and a decision I knew I would never forget. I made a cup of black tea, sat down, and unlocked my phone. The vendor list sat inside a folder called Wedding Mom's Gift. Today, I would take that gift back. The first call was to the supplier. "Hello, this is Sandra Whitmore. I need to cancel the buffet order for the 18th. Ma'am, with only a few days left, we'll have to charge a fee." "I understand," I said. "Go ahead and charge the card. I'm not changing my mind." Then the bakery. The multi-tiered cake I'd ordered for Brandon, with "Love always wins" in vanilla buttercream. I once thought that phrase symbolized his happiness. Now it tasted like vinegar. "Hello, Mrs. Whitmore. Would you like to change the design?" "No, I'd like to cancel." "You can keep the deposit." "I don't need it anymore." The clerk went quiet, then softened. "Are you sure?" "It's your son's wedding cake." "I'm sure," I said. Sometimes love doesn't need frosting. It needs seasoning with respect. When I hung up, relief spread through me. Each dialed number was a step back into control of my own life. Next, the florist. I had chosen sunflowers, my husband's favorite, for the head table. Now I felt they deserved to be placed somewhere else. I'm sorry, I need to cancel the order for the 18th. Would you like to reschedule? No, I'd like to give the flowers to myself. Last was the decor team, the ones who called me the groom's adorable mom. I no longer wanted them staging a ceremony for an event where I'd been assigned to the kitchen to watch kids. Thank you, I said, but I've changed my mind. Cancel everything, and please send confirmations by email. I opened my inbox to a row of order cancellation confirmed. Each line felt like a door closing softly, neatly, no excuses needed. I took screenshots of them all and saved them into a new folder named Dignity. When it was all done, I made a glass of lemonade and stood at the window looking at the lavender by the porch. The scent drifted like a farewell. Inside, something had just unlatched. I opened the closet and took out the ocean blue dress, the one I reserved for special days. It wasn't a party dress, not too fancy, but every time I wore it, I felt alive, confident, free, calm. I smoothed the hem, looked in the mirror, and smiled. Freedom. I whispered. Looks good on me. Around 10 o'clock, Brandon called. He sounded excited. Mom, I'm planning to swing by and haul the food to the venue. Need me to help with anything? I kept my tone steady. No need, honey. Everything's being handled. Really, you're our lifesaver. Lila keeps saying if it weren't for you, we'd be eating sandwiches for a month after the wedding. I gave a faint smile. Well, maybe that wouldn't be the worst lesson. Brandon laughed, not catching my meaning, and hung up. I looked at the black screen, at my reflection. There was a new wrinkle at the corner of my eye, but also a spark, the light of someone no longer afraid of being used. At noon, I reprinted the letter for the table. This time I added a small page, a bullet list of the exact phrases I'd overheard the previous afternoon, word for word, no commentary, no anger. I wanted them to face their own words. White paper, black ink evidence that needed no explanation. When the page came out, I smoothed it, slipped it into the envelope, sealed it, and set it neatly in the center of the table, exactly where I'd planned to place trays of pastries and punch. Then I dropped a pin to Carmen with a text. If they show up at the house, please switch on the door cam. I don't want anyone touching this place while I'm gone. See you at the station at 5 p.m., Carmen replied with a fist bump and a heart. I laughed. She always gets me no long speeches required. Around 3 in the afternoon, I started packing. Not much. A few simple outfits, a novel, my husband's old music player, and a small framed photo. I set the house keys on the table, then pulled the door shut so gently, even the wind sounded relieved. The train left at 5:30. I took a window seat. Carmen sat across from me with 2 hot coffees. Well, she said, handing me a cup, to the grandest departure of your life. Thanks, I smiled. I've never felt leaving could be this easy. As the train rolled out, the city slid back, the buildings, the streets, and the little house where I'd spent 30 years cooking, washing, waiting, and serving. Now it all shrank to a faint dot. It felt like setting down a suitcase full of rocks I'd carried half my life. Cold air carried the iron smell of the rails and the coffee in the car. I sipped warmth to the heart. Carmen tilted her head. How do you think they'll react when they realize there's no buffet, no childcare? I shrugged. Chaos, probably. But chaos is the only teacher for people who've taken order for granted. Carmen chuckled. Sounds like a movie line. You gonna write a book? I'm just gonna write the truth. So next time someone asks why I didn't attend my son's wedding, I can say, because I chose to respect myself first. My phone buzzed non-stop. The screen lit up. Brandon, 5 calls. Lila, 3. Page 1. I set it face down and switched to silent. Not picking up? Carmen asked. I have nothing to say. They'll understand through my absence. The train glided past golden fields fading into dusk. I leaned back, listening to the wheels grind a steady rhythm. The worry and anger ebbed away, leaving a deep calm. I closed my eyes and pictured Portland, a bright hall, guests in formal wear. White-clothed tables, but in the center, the buffet table bare, no food at all, only an ivory envelope neatly addressed Brandon and Lila. I imagined Lila opening it, eyes wide, lips shaking as she read. Instead of cooking and babysitting, today I choose to rest. Consider this your first marriage lesson. When someone loves you unconditionally, don't treat them as a given. I smiled in the dim train car. Outside, the ocean appeared in the distance, sunset spilling like a red velvet cloth. Carmen touched my hand. Sandra, what are you thinking? I'm picturing their faces when they realize the real banquet is my absence. Carmen laughed out loud, and I leaned on the window, feeling the rails hum through my chest. For the first time in years, I felt light, not because I was loved, but because I finally loved myself. And so, amid the soft metal murmur of the train, I whispered to myself, goodbye, obligation. Good morning, freedom. That morning, I woke in the seaside room to the steady ocean outside the window. No phone shrilling, no knocking, no kitchen smells, just essential oils and soft spa music. I brewed peppermint tea and opened my half-read novel, feeling light as air. Today was my son's wedding, the day I was supposed to be frantic in the kitchen. Instead, I sat looking out at the sea, tea in hand, waiting to see how the world runs when I'm no longer the spare wheel. At 9 a.m., my phone lit up. Brandon. Mom, do you need me to come haul stuff? I can swing by before the ceremony. I looked at the screen and chuckled, still no idea what's day coming. I set the phone down without replying. I closed my eyes and let the steam warm my face, cozy, gentle, and peaceful, like age 69 was a gift I'd never unwrapped until now. At 11 a.m., my feet were in a soak when the phone rang nonstop. 3, then 4, then 5 calls in a row. I stayed silent. A spa attendant glanced over and smiled. Would you like me to switch it to silent for you? I nodded. Thank you, sweetheart. When I turned it back on to check, notifications flooded in. Brandon, Lila, and Paige filled the screen. I skimmed a few lines like rereading a script I already knew by heart. Mom, Sandra, the vendors are calling. They say everything's canceled. Is there a mistake? Mom, they said you signed the buffet cancellation. Maybe they mixed you up with someone else? I breathed in and looked out the window. On the beach, gulls swooped down and left tiny prints in the sand. I felt strangely at peace. My whole life, whenever mess erupted, I was the first to jump up and clean it. Today, I chose to sit still. At 1:30 p.m., another message, Lila's tone clearly shaking. Mom, Sandra, guests are arriving early. Can you come set the tables? I'm running out of time. I smiled and powered the phone off. I didn't want to watch the scene, but I knew some lessons must be learned in chaos. Advice won't do it. Around 3 p.m., I turned the phone back on and the screen lit up like a Christmas tree. 26 missed calls, 12 urgent texts. I scrolled. No food. The kids are running wild. Who's in charge now? Mrs. Sandra, where are you? I took a sip of water and called Brandon back. He picked up on the first ring, near tears. Mom, what happened? There's no food. The restaurant says it's canceled. The kids are going crazy. Lila's about to faint. Where are you? I kept my tone even, like discussing the weather. Oh, I'm getting a chocolate massage, honey. It's lovely. Remember to grab a light snack so you don't get hungry. Silence on the other end. I could picture Brandon's face amid the crowd noise, crying kids, and Lila shouting. You're getting a massage? Yep. I took another sip, at a seaside spa. You know, after months of prep, I figured I could use a break. I heard something drop, maybe a glass, maybe the phone. Then Lila's voice cut in, high and sharp. "What are you doing? You ditched us? Do you know the guests are asking who's responsible?" I answered slowly, each word clear. "No, I didn't ditch anyone. I stopped doing what I was never asked about in the first place." She went quiet, then switched to bargaining. "Come on, Mom, can you come back? I'll pay you, okay?" $500, just watch the kids. I chuckled. $500 won't buy back respect, Lila. 1,000, 2,000. I'll pay 2,000. Will you come right now? I tilted. My head, watching the waves outside, my voice light as ocean air. If you had money to hire me at the last minute, why didn't you hire a caterer from the start, sweetheart? Rage roared on the line, mixed with children crying. I hung up, silenced the phone, and turned on soft jazz. The warm saxophone drifted out and blended with the surf, as if the world was coaxing me. Just breathe, Sandra, just breathe. About half an hour later, a text came from an unknown number. Mrs. Sandra, I'm Ava's mom. The invitation said there would be childcare, but there's no one. Were we misled? I sighed. Those poor parents. But I couldn't keep covering for others' mistakes. I replied, I'm sorry. I'm no longer in charge of this wedding. I hope your daughter has a safe afternoon. A moment later, Carmen walked in with a glass of red wine. You doing okay? I am, I said. Just a little sad that people often learn respect only after they've lost what they never took for granted. Carmen sat beside me and pulled up her phone. Look, someone had posted live photos from the wedding, a chaotic hall, kids racing everywhere, the cake toppled, stained tablecloths. The caption read, "No idea why there's no food. Someone says the catering got canceled last minute." I looked at the screen, feeling neither joy nor revenge, just emptiness. Maybe this is the price for learning that love isn't obedience. Late that night, as the surf grew heavier, one more call came. This time it was only Brandon's voice, raw and exhausted. Mom, I was wrong. Mom, I was really wrong. I stayed quiet for a moment. Then I answered, slow but firm. Honey, wrong not because I didn't show up. Wrong because you didn't ask me first. Sometimes people don't need answers, they need to be heard. On the other end, Brandon said nothing. I heard the wind and someone crying. I couldn't tell if it was my son or my daughter-in-law. Maybe both. I ended the call, set the phone down, and leaned back. Moonlight slipped through the curtain onto my hands, the hands that once trembled, cooking for others, now steady and calm. I closed my eyes, listened to the waves, and understood. Sometimes absence weighs more than any lecture. Carmen glanced over, half teasing. Any regrets, Sandra? I shook my head and smiled. No, I just wish I'd done it sooner. Out there, the waves slammed against the shore like fireworks. I leaned back in the chair and took a long breath. In my mind, I could still see the hall in chaos, people shouting over music that kept cutting out. In the middle of that mess lay a single envelope on the table, my signature still clear, with love and with dignity, Mom. And I knew that starting tomorrow, they wouldn't forget that name again. That night, just after I turned off the light in my room, my phone buzzed. Brandon's name lit up the screen. I hesitated for a few seconds before answering. On the other end were quick, ragged breaths that broke into sobs I hadn't heard since he was a little boy. Mom, his voice caught. I'm sorry. I let Lila lead the way. I thought you liked helping. I figured you were happy working for the wedding. I forgot you were the guest of honor. I went quiet. The dark room was lit only by the night lamp, throwing shaky yellow shadows on the wall. I could hear the remorse in my son's voice and the shame he was trying to swallow. I answered slowly, Honey, I love you, but I'm not a free resource. I'm not at an age where people get to use me and drop me whenever they want. Maybe all of us have been there, always giving, always enduring, until we realize love needs limits too. If this part hits home for you, Leave a comment. Do you think saying no can sometimes be the most lasting form of love? Your share might be a light for someone who's forgotten their own worth. Silence on the line. Then Brandon choked up again. I don't know. You've always done everything for me without asking for anything. I got used to it. When Lila said you'd handle it all, I didn't think twice. I was wrong. I didn't scold him. I simply said, "You weren't wrong for asking me. You were wrong for assuming I would." Maybe I played a part in that too, after all these years of thinking love means serving. "Can I see you?" he asked, voice shaking. "Not for now," I said gently. "After this weekend, when I'm back from the coast, we'll talk like two adults." Not like a mom and a panicked son. Brandon was quiet for a moment, then whispered, "Okay, Mom." I hung up and sat still for a long time. The night waves rolled in, each beat like a lullaby. I wasn't angry at my son, and I didn't feel triumphant that he finally saw his mistake. I just felt something lift off my chest. Maybe the weight of 30 years of being the mom who's always on call to rescue. The next morning I went out to the deck with Carmen. The ocean stretched endlessly, the surface glittering in the early sun. Seagulls skimmed low, and the sound of waves thudding against the hull came steady as a heartbeat. Carmen handed me one of two coffees. "Did you talk to Brandon?" I nodded. He cried. "Did you soften?" I didn't, but I feel lighter. Carmen sat beside me, the wind whipping her hair. "You know, a lot of women our age still think love equals obedience. You just proved the opposite." I smiled, eyes on the horizon. "Love isn't losing yourself, it's teaching people how to treat you." We sat a while longer, listening only to wind and water. I thought about the years that had passed, how many times I stayed silent when I was belittled, how many times I said, "It's fine," just to keep the peace. And what did that lead to? People thinking I had no boundaries. Now, for the first time in my life, my boundaries felt as clear as the horizon. I didn't need anyone's validation, only my own understanding that I deserve respect. By noon, as I was walking the marina, my phone rang again. This time it was Aunt Evelyn, my late husband's sister Blunt, a bit hot-tempered, but she loves me like family. "Good heavens, Sandra," she said the second I picked up. "The whole family's buzzing about Brandon's wedding. They say Lila's a mess and Brandon looks lost as a goose. If my brother were alive, he'd have dragged that boy out back and set him straight." I laughed, feeling lighter. "Don't be mad at him, Auntie. He was foolish, not cruel." "Well, the daughter-in-law is another story," she snapped. "That kind of scheming can't be excused. She needs a hard lesson." "Life's already teaching her," I said. "Just a little late." Her voice softened. "Sandra, I'm proud of you. I've never seen anyone stand up like that. You didn't just save yourself, you taught Brandon a lesson he'll never forget." "Thank you," I said quietly. "If a mother-in-law like you says so, I must not be wrong." She laughed loud. "Right or wrong, if you're at peace, that's what matters." That afternoon I got a few messages from parents who'd been at the wedding. "Mrs. Sandra, I just wanted to say, you did the right thing. I heard people blaming you, but all you asked for was what should have been there. If I were as brave as you, maybe my daughter wouldn't treat me like the live-in help." I read each line and felt warm. In all that chaos, at least a few people understood I wasn't rebelling, I was simply done with submission. But mixed in with the support were texts from Lila. "You ruined my big day. Are you happy seeing people criticize me? You'll have to live with that conscience forever." I hit read and set the phone face down. I didn't need to answer. Silence is the perfect mirror, everyone sees themselves in it. That evening, I took the notebook out to the balcony where the breeze was gentle and moonlight spilled across the ocean. I wrote a few lines. Tomorrow's conditions. Ask first, show respect my right to say no. 3 simple principles, but I knew they'd be my compass from now on. I didn't want to be angry anymore. I just wanted to live properly and be treated like a person, not a silent servant. Carmen watched me write. What will you say to Brandon when you see him?" "I won't say much," I answered. "He just needs to understand that loving your mother doesn't mean she has to carry your whole life." "And Lila?" I shrugged. "She needs time to face consequences. Not everyone learns respect in a day." The next morning, Carmen and I went down to a little seaside cafe for breakfast. The air smelled of fresh roasted coffee and waffles. I ordered an omelet with spinach. Carmen chose pancakes with syrup. When the server brought our plates, she asked, "Anything else for you, ladies?" I smiled. "No, thank you. Everything's perfect." I ate slowly, savoring each bite like I was savoring being treated like a paying customer. No condescension, no being taken for granted. Every spoonful reminded me I was living for myself. After breakfast, we walked to the beach. The sand was soft under my feet. The cold water lapped at my ankles like nature's gentle handshake. Watching the waves chase each other out to sea, I thought, turns out, when you set boundaries, life's tides learn to pull back too. That afternoon, I boarded the train back home. The city came into view, the familiar rooftops and streets I'd traveled 1,000 times. But this time, everything felt different. I was still me, the silver hair, the chapped hands, but inside, something had changed for good. Carmen squeezed my hand before she got off. "You going to be okay?" I nodded. "I've got a cool head and a warm heart. That's all I need." I wheeled my suitcase out of the bast station and took a deep breath of city air. A new chapter was starting. No debts, no blind sacrifices. Just me, Sandra Whitmore, a 69-year-old woman who had learned that self-respect is the finest gift a mother can give herself. The next afternoon, I was tidying up a few flower pots in the yard when I heard a car pull up. Through the curtain, I saw Brandon step out. He wore a wrinkled shirt, dark circles under his eyes, hair a mess, nothing like a groom fresh off his wedding. Maybe for the first time in years, I saw my son without the mask of holding it together. He stood on the porch for a moment, hesitating. I opened the door and looked him in the eyes. "Come in, honey," I said softly. Brandon gave a strained smile and walked in like a child caught doing wrong. The house smelled of cookies I'd just baked a batch, not for guests but to feel calm. We sat across from each other at the dining table that used to be piled with menus, purchase orders, and wedding plans. Now there were just 2 cups of hot tea and silence. Brandon spoke first. "Mom, I don't know where to start." "Start with the truth," I said. "Don't say what you think I want to hear." He took a deep breath, eyes down. "I'm ashamed, Mom. When everything fell apart, I realized I'd let someone else decide how to treat you. I always thought I was a good son, but really I was lazy. I let Lila arrange things and just went along. I figured you liked helping, that it made you happy." "I was wrong." I nodded slowly, not interrupting. When he finished, I said, "You weren't wrong for trusting people, Brandon. You were wrong for not asking me. What's done is done, but we need to reset a few rules so no one gets hurt again." I pulled a folded sheet from my pocket, opened it, and read, "First, always ask, don't assume. I'm not on standby to fill gaps. If you need help, ask. If I agree, it's a choice, not an obligation. Second, I'm a guest, not staff. When I'm invited, I'll come as family, not as a worker. Third, I have the right to say no. And when I do, you don't get to turn it into guilt." Brandon sat quietly for a long moment, then nodded. "I understand. I promise I'll remember." "Not just remember," I said, meeting his eyes. "Practice it." He nodded again, eyes moist. "I'll make it right with actions." I leaned back, hands around my cup. "Good, I don't need promises. I need real change." The room went still. The kitchen clock ticked loudly. Then I asked, calm but firm enough to make him look up, "Brandon, it's right to protect your wife, of course." "I support that, but when your wife disrespects me, what exactly are you protecting?" The question dropped like a pebble into a pond, quiet, but the ripples ran far. Brandon looked at me, then lowered his head, fingers laced. I don't know what to say, Mom. That day I thought if I spoke up, Lila would be mad. I wanted to keep the peace, so I stayed quiet. But I realize silence is also choosing the wrong side. I nodded. Sometimes silence is worse than collusion. It convinces people that injustice is normal. Brandon lifted his head, eyes sincere. I promise, if anyone puts you down, Lila, or anyone else, I won't stand by. The corners of my mouth trembled not from emotion, but from relief. I don't need a hero, Brandon. I just need you to be decent. I stood, took a stack of papers from the drawer, and set them on the table. These are the bills I paid for the wedding ingredients: decor, flowers, cake, plus the cancellation fees. Look over $3,200. I'm not asking for a cent back, but I want you to see the cost of convenience. Brandon flipped through them, face flushing. I didn't realize you paid that much. Yep, I said. Most people who get taken for granted are the ones who give too much and ask for nothing. I'm not angry, but I want you to remember this feeling. Every time you think, let Mom handle it, remember today. He nodded, eyes wet. I understand. Mom, let me start over. I smiled, but kept my tone firm. Starting over means changing habits, not resetting the table. From now on, anytime you want my help cooking, babysitting, party prep, you must have a plan B. Hire a service, ask someone else, or postpone. I won't be forced to choose between feeling guilty and having boundaries. Brandon nodded slowly, as if memorizing each word, and, I added, whenever I say no, you won't use emotions to sway me. No tears. No, Mom, I'm struggling. That's my right to autonomy. He gave a rueful smile. You make it sound like we're signing a contract. We are, I said. I've worked without a contract for years. Time to sign one with dignity. The air softened. Sunlight slanted through the window onto Brandon's clenched hands. He sighed. Mom, I want to host a small dinner to make amends. I want to invite Aunt Evelyn and Miss Carmen. I want to apologize publicly. I looked at him and saw the honesty there. Who are you doing that for? For me or because you feel guilty? He hesitated. Both, but mostly for me. I can't stand people thinking I let my mother be treated like an outsider. I set a hand on his shoulder. Good, I agree, but there's one condition. Anything. Tell me. Lila has to apologize on her own, not lines you write, not a script for smooth sailing. I want to hear her speak in the voice of someone who knows she was wrong, not someone trying to reclaim face. Brandon was quiet, then nodded. I understand. I'll tell her. Can you give her a little time? Of course. 3 days. I don't want a token apology. I want her to understand why I left. He studied me for a long moment, eyes heavy. Mom, I'm afraid she won't show. That's an answer. 2, I said. No one learns respect if they won't face consequences. Brandon stood and hugged me awkward, clumsy, but warm. Thank you for still talking to me. I smiled. I can get mad, but I don't know how to hate you. When he left, I stood in the doorway and watched him go. His figure grew small down the path, but I knew something inside me had just been mended. That night, I sat on the sofa, opened my notebook, and added a line. Setting boundaries doesn't make us cold, it teaches others how to love right. Then, I closed it, turned off the light, and treated myself to a small glass of wine. The taste was gentle and warm, spreading down my throat. I felt unburdened, like I'd finally loosened a knot tied for half a lifetime. For the next 3 days, I would wait for Lila's knock not to hear an apology, but to see whether she could step through the door of maturity and respect. 3 days later, on a windless afternoon, I heard a car stop at the gate. The engine went off, then quiet. I knew it was Lila. A mother's instinct told me today wouldn't be like any conversation before. When the door opened, I saw her, not the radiant bride in a white dress, not the woman with a flawless camera-ready smile, but a young woman who looked lost and exhausted. Her hair was tied back, face pale without makeup, hands trembling. She spoke softly. "Hello, Mrs. Whitmore." I heard how she said it. "No, Mom Sandra this time." Her voice was small and careful, like she was testing the air. I just nodded. "Come in." We sat in the living room. I poured tea. Lavender drifted in the air. She bowed her head, fingers woven tight like she needed something to hold on to. "Before you speak," I said, "understand this. There's no script today. I don't want a pre-written apology. I want the truth." Lila nodded, eyes brimming. I'm sorry. I'm sorry," she corrected herself, voice shaking. "I don't know where to start. I'm not here to make excuses, but I owe you an explanation." I stayed quiet, letting her find her breath. "All my life," she said, "I've never really had a mom. My mother died when I was 12. My dad remarried so fast I barely understood what was happening. The new woman never saw me as a daughter. She told me straight, 'You're just the shadow of the old wife.' After that, I learned to protect myself by acting strong and controlling everything." I nodded slightly. "I know that feeling." Lila gave a weak smile. "When I met Brandon, I saw how much he loved you. You were everything I never had, warm, generous, respected. Instead of learning to get close to you, I got jealous. I was afraid you'd always be the center of the family, that Brandon would choose you over me. And in my head, there was only one way not to be overshadowed: put you down." Her voice broke, but she pressed on. "I said cruel things, not because I hated you, but because I was afraid I wasn't enough. I thought if my sister believed I could manage my in-laws, I'd feel stronger. Paige is always so capable, with a perfect family, and I'm always proving myself. I turned you into a tool to lift myself up in other people's eyes. Thinking about it now, it's shameful." I looked at her without judgment. It sounded true, but I needed to be sure she understood the heart of it. "Lila," I asked slowly, "do you want real healing, or are you just trying to patch things up to keep the peace?" The question made her look up. Her eyes were red, but she wasn't dodging anymore. "Real healing, Mrs. Whitmore. I've talked to my therapist. I'll keep going to learn healthy boundaries and to stop turning people into competitors." I set my cup down, my voice low but steady. "Good, but my conditions are clear. You get one chance. One. If you repeat this, if I hear one more joke at my expense or any put down our Midas, relationship becomes strictly polite. No war, no hate, but no closeness either. Understood?" Lila nodded hard, eyes shining. "I understand. And I accept." I stood, went to the bookshelf, and laid a small file on the table. "Know what this is?" She read the cover softly. "Invoicing. Wedding project. All the bills and penalties I took on canceling the buffet, decor, flowers, and cake. Over $3,200. She swallowed, looking confused and guilty. "I'm not saying this to ask for money," I said. "I want you to understand. Every little fun move you make has a cost. Not in dollars, but in trust." She was quiet for a long moment, then spoke almost in a whisper. "I'll reimburse all of it. Not because you asked, but because I need to take responsibility. I'll also write apology letters to every parent who was there. Brandon told me some are still upset about being misled on childcare. I didn't answer right away. I studied her, and the usual pretense wasn't there. She looked worn out but sincere. Maybe for the first time, Lila truly wanted to make things right. "I don't need your money," I said. "But I want you to tell the truth. To Paige, to your family, to anyone who heard you mock me. Say it was your fault, not a misunderstanding, not a joke. If you want a fresh start, begin with accountability." Lila took a breath. "I will. I promise." We sat in silence for a while. I heard the clock ticking and the leaves rustling outside. Lila looked around the house where she once walked in with high heels and a perfect smile, now just awkward and humble. "I thought you'd hate me forever," she said softly. "I don't know how to hate someone that long," I answered. "But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. I'll keep a safe distance. You need time to prove yourself, and I need space to trust again." She nodded, sad but relieved. "Thank you for seeing me. If I were you, I'd have locked the door." I tilted my head, smiling a little. "I've done that before." Then I realized sometimes a door needs to open not to let someone in, but to let them step out of their own foolishness. Lila smiled through tears. She stood and pulled a small bundle of lavender from her bag, wrapped in brown paper and tied with thin twine. "This is a gift," she said, voice unsteady. "I know you like lavender. I hope when you see it, you'll remember someone is trying to learn respect." I took the bouquet. The scent spread softly through the room. "Thank you. Lavender blooms again after a harsh winter. I hope you do too." She bowed her head. "I'll try. And I won't call you Mom until you feel I deserve it." I watched as she stepped outside. Her small figure disappeared beneath the trees. She turned back once and said, voice hoarse but firm, "See you again when I've learned respect." The door closed, leaving lavender in the faucet. Air. I stood for a long time, unsure if I was moved or relieved. Maybe both. I set the bouquet on the table beside my cooled tea. Lavender mingled with the steam like a reminder that even deep wounds can bloom if we bow to dignity. A week later, as I was tending the lavender on the porch, my phone rang, Brandon's name on the screen. I hesitated for a few seconds, then picked up. "Mom," he said, a little nervous but gentler than before. "Your birthday is this weekend." I smiled. "Thank you for remembering." "Not just remember," he went on. "I hired catering, a DJ, and even the neighbor's backyard. Could you give me some input on the decor?" I went quiet for a moment. My birthdays had been simple for years. One small cake, a few cards, sometimes nothing but a late text. This time, Brandon himself wanted to host it. What moved me even more was the way he asked, not assuming, not ordering, but asking for input. I smiled and kept my voice steady. "You already hired catering?" "Yes. They'll handle all the food, service, and cleanup. I also booked the DJ booth, lighting, and a drink station. But I want you to help pick the light colors and the table linens. You have better taste than I do." I laughed, my heart dipping a beat. "All right. But how much are you planning to pay me?" Brandon hesitated, then let out a small laugh. I plan to pay you. Just name your rate." "I don't want you doing this for free anymore." I almost burst out laughing. "No need, son. I won't take money for sharing ideas, but I appreciate the way you asked. Let's start over from there, okay?" "Yes." "Thank you, Mom." I grabbed pen and paper and jotted a few suggestions. Use warm yellow lighting, not white. The softer light makes everyone look better in photos. Choose sand-colored linen tablecloths, elegant yet inviting. Go with wildflowers for decor, budget-friendly and natural. I sent Brandon sample photos, then walked him through arranging vases using a 1:3 ratio between vase height and table diameter. He listened closely, asking about each detail like a diligent student. "I'll do it myself, Mom," he said. "I want to handle this part on my own, not hire anyone." In the afternoon, I stopped by the yard where the party would be held. Brandon was wrestling with string lights, sweat on his forehead. The scene took me back to when he was little, fixing his bike or sawing wood with his dad. Maybe in that moment, I felt lucky to still have the chance to teach him things that seem small, but are the foundation of respect. "Hang the lights a bit higher," I said. "So when people look up, they aren't blinded." "Got it." Brandon adjusted them, then smiled at me. Thanks, Mom. Now I get why everything you do always feels just right. It's not because I'm skillful, I said. It's because I used to do things for others without anyone asking what I wanted. When people ask, you learn how to make them feel respected. Brandon nodded, eyes more grounded than before. That night, the party unfolded under soft, warm lights, cozy music, and laughter rippling across the garden. Tables were dressed in sand-colored linen, each with a small vase of daisies, lavender, and a few olive sprigs, simple and elegant. I stepped into the glow, and no one assigned me anything. No one shoved a menu or a guest list into my hands. I was welcomed like a true guest, not the one working backstage. As the party began, Brandon raised his glass, voice full of feeling. Tonight isn't just my mom's birthday. It's my chance to thank her for a big lesson, a lesson in respect. People applauded. I saw Lila standing beside him, eyes a little red but smiling softly. When it was her turn, she took the mic, drew a breath, and said, "Tonight's decor, every bit of it came from Mom Sandra's ideas." I just followed her guidance, and honestly, learning. To listen to her has been the best gift I got this year. I paused, surprised. From her mouth, the words Mom Sandra sounded gentle and unforced. Maybe it was the first time she used that title with true respect. One of Lila's friends, a redhead nearby, laughed. "Oh my gosh, your mother-in-law's taste is amazing. This looks like a magazine spread." Lila smiled, neither bragging nor taking credit. She answered calmly, "Right. I just followed the color pairing she taught me. She has a great eye." Simple words, but I knew it was a big step, not a forced compliment, not a line to smooth things over. It was acknowledgement, and for people wounded by pride, acknowledgement is a rare gift. At the corner, Aunt Evelyn watched quietly. She lifted her glass, looked at me, and smiled. "My nephew has finally grown up, Sandra. Maybe a bit late, but worth it." I laughed. "Whitmore men have never been on time, Auntie. This time, at least he got it right." Aunt Evelyn laughed out loud and clinked glasses with me. "Good. Because this family's boy finally learned to cook a dish called respect." Near the end, I stood to leave early. "I'm heading out," I said. At my age, late nights aren't what they used to be. Brandon stepped in right away and took my hand. "You don't have to clean up. I hired a crew. Tonight, you just go rest." I looked at him and felt something hard to name: relief, tenderness, and a little pride. "Sounds like you're following my 3 rules already." Brandon grinned and scratched his head. "I'm just scared you'll try to take over." On the walk home, I moved slowly, night air brushing my cheeks. It felt like a chapter had ended not with tears, but with peace. No loud apologies, just small, quiet, sincere actions. Back home, I made myself a hot cocoa, opened my notebook, and wrote under a soft lamp, "Respect starts with paying the right people for the right work." I paused. I thought for a moment, then added a small line beneath it, "And real love begins when no one has to prove who sacrifices more." Just then my phone lit up. It was Carmen. Her text was only 3 words. "Proud of you." I smiled and typed back, "I'm proud of myself too." I set the phone down, leaned back, and listened to the clock tick in the living room. Outside, a new moon peeked through the trees, its soft gold over the lavender pots I'd planted. The scent drifted through the house, a gentle reminder that when you learn to respect yourself, the world around you starts to shift naturally, slowly, but in a way that lasts. On a quiet Monday morning, while I brewed coffee and sorted a few notes in my notebook, the phone rang. An unfamiliar number, an area code I didn't recognize. I hesitated and picked up. "Is this Mrs. Sandra Whitmore?" A warm, steady older woman's voice. "Yes, this is she." "Sorry, who's calling?" "Carol. I'm the mother of one of the kids who was at Brandon's wedding." I froze for a moment. That name brought back a chaotic afternoon, children crying, people calling out over each other, and the shame Lila had to face. I waited. "Mrs. Sandra," Carol said. "I'm calling to say one thing. You did the right thing. I've watched women be treated like property my whole life, expected to cook, care, and smile to keep everyone else comfortable. That day, when you didn't show up at the wedding, I was mad, but after I heard what happened, I understood. No one should be used as a tool to prop up someone else's image." I laughed softly, my voice a little shaky. "Thank you. Sometimes saying no isn't rebellion, it's a reminder that we're still human." "Exactly," Carol said. "And because of you, I said no to my own daughter. I love her, but I can't carry her forever. Last night, I refused to babysit, and for the first time in my life, I slept straight through." I laughed. Tears, pricking. "Congratulations. One no can be more powerful than 1,000 lectures." After that call, I sat quietly for a while. I hadn't expected a small act to travel that far. Maybe respect is contagious in its own way. It starts with one person who dares to stop, so others dare to start. That afternoon, I got another call, this time a deep, calm male voice. "Hello, this is Mitchell Grant, Lila's father." I paused. I'd only heard his name through Brandon. I didn't expect him to call. "I know this is a surprise," he continued. "But I felt I had to speak up. I just met with both my daughters, Lila and Paige, and I gave them a proper scolding. I was quiet for a few seconds. You didn't have to do that," I said gently. "They're young. They'll learn." "No, Mrs. Sandra," Mitchell said firmly. "I let them grow up without learning how to respect other women." Lila watched her mother carry everything without complaint. She thought that was normal. "You did what I should have taught her a long time ago." I didn't know what to say besides. "Thank you." He cleared his throat. "I also want to apologize on their behalf. We may not be close, but I understand how one generation's mistakes can make the next repeat them. I promise, if anyone in the family gossips, I'll speak up. You won't face any more unfair stares." Warmth spread through my chest. "I appreciate that, Mr. Mitchell. But I don't want this to be a burden on anyone. It's enough if they learn the lesson." "I think they will," he said more softly. "You know, I get the feeling Lila is really changing." She sent me a photo of a lavender bouquet and wrote, "Dad, I'm learning respect starting with a woman named Sandra." I said nothing. The smell of cooling coffee mingled with the flowers outside. Something in me felt like it finally closed, not anger, but a chapter of hurt. A few days later, an envelope arrived in my mailbox. The sender, Women's Circle Club, an old local group I joined years ago. Inside was an invitation. "Dear Mrs. Sandra Whitmore, we're grateful for the story and lesson you shared. Many of our members would love to hear you speak at next month's meeting on the topic, Boundaries and Dignity After 60. I read it over and over, half in doubt. I'd never been a speaker, just someone who cooked and told stories in my little kitchen. Then I thought, if my story can help someone stand up, why not? I picked up a pen and wrote back, yes. That night, I opened my notebook and titled the talk, Give from Love, Not Fear of Being Left Behind. I remembered the years I misunderstood, thinking love meant always being available, always carrying the load, always staying quiet so everything stayed smooth. Aging taught me this. Real love doesn't ask you to erase yourself. The talk took place on a Sunday afternoon. A small room, warm light, chairs in a circle. Around, 30 women, mostly silver-haired, some with canes, some with wedding bands still shining. I stood among them, mic in hand, voice a little shaky. I'm not special. I'm just a woman who cooked, washed, and smiled when I was dismissed until the day I realized respect doesn't appear by magic. We teach people how to treat us by the way we treat ourselves. Some nodded, some wiped tears. I told my story plainly, no embellishments, no bitterness. I told the truth. The day I heard my daughter-in-law say, "It's cheaper if she babysits." The letter I left, and the wedding, with no food, but plenty of lessons. When I finished, the room was quiet for a few seconds, then applause rolled in. 3 older ladies came up to hug me, eyes shining. One whispered, "Because of you, we said no. I canceled 3 weeks of babysitting in Florida. I feel so light." Another added, "I'm not afraid of my daughter's anger anymore. You gave us courage no class ever taught." I squeezed their hands, too choked up to speak. In that moment I realized sometimes one person stepping out is enough for others to follow, like tiny sparks spreading light through a dark room. That evening, I sat alone at my table and opened my notebook. On the last page I wrote, "Cook with love, serve with dignity." I thought about all those years in the kitchen, believing my value lived in good food. Now I knew true value is knowing when to stop when someone treats you as a default. I called Carmen and told her about the talk. She squealed through the phone, "You should write a book, Sandra. One for women like us." I smiled, voice soft. "Not yet. I want to start with a small handbook, something honest, close, easy to read. If enough people see themselves in it, then we'll think about a book." "Then let me handle the layout," she said. "You write, we'll make it together, like 2 cooks sharing a dish." I laughed. "Deal. But this time, we both get paid." When I hung up, I looked out the window. Sunset washed the sky orange. Light bounced off my teacup and warmed the room. I closed my eyes and smiled. At 69, I thought my part in life was done. Turns out, meaning doesn't leave anyone, it waits until we're brave enough to say one small no. From that no, I found myself again calm, free, and still full of love. One April morning, with sunlight slipping through the window, a text arrived from an unknown number. "Mrs. Sandra, this is Paige Lila's sister. I think we should talk." I stared at the words, my heart dipping. That name took me back to the snicker behind the curtain on that fateful day. Cheaper, and it keeps her busy so she won't meddle in grown-up business. I'd never forgotten it. I replied simply, "I'm home all morning. If you want to meet, come by." About an hour later, Paige's car stopped at the gate. She got out with the polished look of someone used to giving. Orders, sharp office dress, heels, a trace of expensive perfume. But when she sat across from me, I saw no arrogance in her eyes, just nerves and a guarded edge. "Mrs. Sandra," she began, a hint of sarcasm in a thin voice. "Maybe that day, I went too far. We were just joking." I didn't answer. I opened my laptop, clicked, and the recording played, "Cheaper, and it keeps her busy so she won't meddle in grown-up business." Yeah, Brandon's mom likes helping anyway. Let her watch, the kid saves money and keeps her occupied. Their laughter, Paige's and Lila's, was crystal clear. When the clip ended, the room froze. Paige sat rigid, hands locked in her lap. Just joking had no place to hide. I spoke softly. "Jokes have limits, Paige. And sometimes the person being made into the joke isn't laughing." She was quiet for a long time, then asked in a low voice, "Why are you keeping that recording?" "For what?" I looked her in the eye. "Not for revenge. To remind you that words carry weight. I don't need you to like me. I need you to respect people. And to start, I want you to send an apology to all the parents who got dragged into that mess." No hedging, no ifs. Paige arched a brow. "You're setting terms?" "No. I'm reteaching the manners you forgot." She bit her lip, a flush rising. "Fine, I'll text them." "Just to get it over with," I nodded. "The reason matters less than the action. Let them know you understand what accountability means." I didn't lecture or pile on. When she stood, I said only one more thing. "Paige, don't use me in any story between you and your sister again. If you need to prove something, use yourself." She paused. then gave a small nod. I understand. When the door closed, I felt no triumph, just calm. Some wins don't need applause, just the quiet of someone who once looked down on you. That afternoon, a text came from Lila. I sent proof of reimbursement for the penalties you covered. I transferred it to your account with an apology. I know you don't need the money, but I need to take responsibility. I opened the screenshot of the statement and placed a hand over my heart. It wasn't about the amount, it was the act, and I knew for Lila this was real. Right then, Brandon called. Mom, I want to host a dinner this weekend. Not a party, just a small reconciliation. Aunt Evelyn, Miss Carmen, Lila, and Paige will be there. Will you come? I was quiet a few seconds. Who's cooking? Brandon laughed. I hired catering. But if you want, I can cook. No need. Just remember the rule. The host handles logistics. The guest only needs to show up. I remember. That dinner was warmer than I expected. The room glowed with candles. The table was simple and refined linen, tiny daisies, white plates with silver rims. Aunt Evelyn sat at the head, Carmen beside her with that kind smile I knew so well. When the main course was served, Lila stood. The room fell quiet. She looked straight at me without flinching. Mom, Sandra, she said slowly, thank you for giving me a second chance. I've apologized to those involved, and tonight, I want to tell you directly that I regret what I did. Not to earn forgiveness, but so you know I truly learned the lesson. I looked at her and saw sincerity. Thank you, Lila. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, but I believe everyone deserves a chance to start over. Then I turned to Paige. She still sat with her head slightly down, hands clutching the napkin. After a few seconds, she looked up. I'm sorry, she said hoarsely. I said stupid things, and I should have apologized sooner. I know without you, Lila would never have learned self-respect. Thank you for not giving up on her. The room settled, lighter now. Aunt Evelyn nodded and murmured, finally, some sense. I stood and pulled a folded paper from my bag. Before we end this dinner, I said, I want us all to sign this. On it were 3 short lines, Whitmore Pledge, 2025-1. In this family we ask first and respect each other's say. 2. No one is assumed to be the help. 3. Every sorry must be proven by action. I set the pen in the middle. Brandon signed first, then Lila, Paige, Aunt Evelyn, Carmen, and finally me. When the pen stopped, Brandon said quietly, I never thought my family would sign a respect contract. I smiled. Neither did I, but sometimes black and white on paper lasts longer than words over dinner. The table laughed, not at the joke, but because everyone felt that the old heaviness had lifted. After dinner, when people moved to the living room, Brandon cleared the dishes. I stood to help, but he held up a hand. No, you sit, he said, pulling a brown canvas apron from his pocket and slipping it on. I'm the help tonight. Everyone laughed. Lila shook her head. You look clumsy. I'm learning, Brandon said, looking at me with warmth. Respect is a skill I'm practicing again. I smiled, filled with a kind of warmth I hadn't felt in a long time. Relief. Not because everything was perfect, but because at last, people had learned to look each other in the eye, not through the lens of expectation. As I was leaving, Brandon walked me to the door. Are you happy, Mom? For now, yes, I said, but I still remember my last principle. What principle? I looked at him and smiled softly. Trust what you see, not just what you hear. People can say many things, but only actions are real proof. Brandon nodded, smiled, and hugged me. Then just watch. I'll handle the rest. I left the house at peace. The night breeze passed by, and the scent of lavender from the bouquet last time still lingered in the car. I smiled to myself maybe. Finally, my biggest test was over. But their journey was just beginning. 2 months passed after the reconciliation dinner. Summer arrived, bringing golden sunlight and the smell of freshly cut grass threading through the neighborhood. I lived quietly with new habits, getting up early to make coffee, writing a few lines in my notebook, then tending the lavender pots on the porch. Life wasn't noisy anymore, but it felt strangely complete. One morning the phone rang. It was Brandon. He sounded as excited as a child. "Mom, great news! Lila is pregnant!" I paused, then burst out laughing. "Really? So I'm about to become a grandmother?" "Yes," Brandon answered, voice trembling. "I just wanted you to be the first to know." I congratulated them, but inside there was a flicker of caution. Joy comes with worry, not because of the baby, but because old habits can creep back. I was afraid they'd assume Mom would shoulder the child care, as if that were a senior's natural duty. But this time was different. A few days later, when I visited, Lila and Brandon were already sitting on the sofa with a stack of notes on the table. "Mom, Sandra," Lila began, gentle but clear, "Brandon and I have a question, and we want your honest answer." I sat down and smiled. "Go ahead. We want to know," she continued. "What kind of grandmother do you want to be?" That question made me pause. Not because it was hard, but because no one had ever asked me that. For years, people assumed grandmothers babysit, cook, and are on call 24/7. And now, those two were asking what I wanted. I looked at them and answered slowly, "I'll be a grandmother with my own schedule. When I'm ready, I'll sign up for shifts like a volunteer, not as an obligation. I want to love my grandchild with joy, not with exhaustion." Lila smiled and nodded, and Brandon let out a breath. "We understand, and we want to be clear from the start." The three of us sat together and drafted what we called a family agreement. We wrote down every little thing. Visits to see the baby must be scheduled at least one day in advance. When I help babysit, they'll have a meal and rest time set aside for me. I have the right to say no if I'm tired with no need to explain, and especially, every bit of help I give will be thanked in words, not treated as a given. When we finished writing, all three of us signed. Brandon joked, "You might be the first grandma with a family contract." I laughed. Good. Every healthy relationship needs clear boundaries. A few days later, Carmen came by with a small envelope. "A gift for the future, Grandma," she said, eyes sparkling. Inside was a 6-week writing class ticket at the community center. "I know you're planning a handbook," she said. "This is the time to start." I laughed. "I don't know how to write well yet." "Just write the way you live," Carmen said. "People don't need philosophy, they need real stories." So every morning I sat at my computer and wrote the first lines of a project I titled Kitchen and Dignity. I didn't just write recipes. I wrote about how older women should be treated when they step into a kitchen, listened to, respected, and allowed to rest. I wrote about the meals I once made in silence, dishes seasoned with tears, and how I ended it by learning to say no, so I could keep the sweetness of my own life. While I wrote, Brandon slowly became a different man. One afternoon, he called me over to see the baby shower plan. "Don't worry, Mom," he said. "I hired a full service. I just need you to help with the colors." I looked at the palette and adjusted it gently. Skip pink and blue. Choose neutral colors, champagne and silver. Every child deserves a start without labels. Brandon smiled. "Great idea. I'll note that." I saw Lila beside him, hand on her belly, face at ease. No guarded look, no distance. She said softly, "Thank you, Mom. Mom, Sandra." For the first time in months, those two words flowed naturally. No forcing, no need to prove anything. I just smiled and squeezed her hand. "That sounds nice." On the party day, the yard was beautifully decorated. White baby's breath mixed with warm lights, and soft ribbons swayed in the breeze. I was just a guest, not cooking, not cleaning, not managing. And it felt magical to sit among the crowd with a glass of juice, listening to my daughter-in-law talk about her pregnancy journey. Aunt Evelyn sat next to me, squinting, then chuckled. "You know, Sandra, we should thank that no at the wedding. If you hadn't done it, you'd probably still be cooking for everyone, and no one would say a word of thanks." I laughed and took a slow sip of my drink. "True, Auntie, that no was a loss for one day, but a gain for the rest of my life." We both laughed, afternoon light sparkling over the table like crystal. That night, I opened my notebook. The first page was almost full, but I added one more line as a reminder to myself: self-respect is a muscle. Use it to keep it strong. If you don't, it will shrink like the things you once forgot. The words stood out, clear and strong, making me feel younger at heart. I looked at my computer screen. The Kitchen and Dignity draft had passed 30,000 words. I reread the temporary ending: cook with love, but don't let anyone treat you like the help. In every kitchen, a woman doesn't just make meals, she is seasoning her own self-respect. I leaned back and smiled. Outside, the night breeze stirred the lavender pots, carrying a soft scent. I realized 69 isn't the closing chapter. It's the turn where you stop living to be needed and start living to be free. For the first time in years, I wasn't just Brandon's mom or a future grandma. I was Sandra Whitmore, a woman who learned to keep her own calendar, live at her own pace, and love her life with all the respect she deserves. That fall, when the leaves began to turn and the sun softened, I decided to print the first run of Kitchen and Dignity. Just 20 copies, paid for with the honorarium from my women's club talk. I bound them myself, labeled them, and numbered each one. I didn't expect that in just 2 weeks. All 20 would sell out not through bookstores or ads, just by word of mouth at the club. They passed them around, read them, then called me with words I never thought I'd hear. "Mrs. Sandra, I see myself on every page. Because of your book." I stopped apologizing for taking a rest. "You write gently," but I felt like I could finally breathe. Each response was a small flame, lighting something inside me, a new feeling rare in old age. Being heard. One Thursday afternoon, while I was editing the draft, the phone rang. A man's voice came, deep and courteous. "Mrs. Sandra, this is Mitchell Grant." I dot. "Read Kitchen and Dignity, Lila sent it to me. Honestly, you should publish it officially. I know a local editor who handles older authors. May I introduce you?" I laughed. "Are you turning me into a professional author now?" Mitchell chuckled. "No, I'm helping the world hear people like you, people who should have been heard long ago." I thought for a moment and agreed. A few days later, I met Linda, the editor he mentioned, at a small cafe near the city library. Linda was around 50, short hair, calm voice. She held my manuscript the whole time, reading passages, then said, "Mrs. Sandra, this isn't just a cookbook. It's a declaration from women who were overlooked. I want to help you bring it to more people." A week later, we signed a small publishing deal, not much money, but enough to print the first 1,000 copies. I remember the morning we signed. Linda joked, "Congratulations, you're officially an author." I just smiled, but when I got infactive there at home and looked at the contract with my signature, I cried, not from pride, but because a life that seemed quiet had finally been called by its name. 3 months later, the book launched with its full title, Warm Kitchen and Dignity, Notes from a Modern Grandma. The cover showed a pair of older hands gripping a pot handle, steam rising in a soft haze. Linda sent me the first printed copy. When I opened it, I saw a small line on the first page. "For every woman who learned to say no to keep one yes for herself." I touched that line as if I were touching my own heart. On launch day, Brandon hosted a signing in my backyard. He set up a long table with a white cloth and lavender. Lila handled the media, designing a banner herself that read, "Meet the author. Mom Sandra Whitmore. Seeing Mom Sandra in bold surprised me for a second. Lila caught my eye and said softly, "I think it's time the world calls you what I do." More guests showed up than I expected. Women of all ages, silver-haired, still youthful, even a few husbands tagging along. Aunt Evelyn worked the refreshment table, pouring drinks and joking, "Don't say Mrs. Sandra only cooks she seasons ethics into her words." Brandon hustled around setting chairs, and Carmen sat nearby, checking the list of pre-orders. It felt simple and warm, like a family gathering. When it was time to speak, I stood in the yard with a mic, hands trembling slightly. But seeing Brandon's trusting eyes, Lila's, and our friends, I took a breath and said, "I've spent a lifetime serving." I used to think serving was a woman's duty, that cooking, caring, and sacrificing were natural obligations. Now I understand. Serving is beautiful only when it's a gift, not a duty. Applause rose. I saw a few people wiping tears. From the crowd, a middle-aged woman stepped forward, clutching the book with shaking hands. "Mrs. Sandra, I attended your son's wedding. That wedding. I'm Ava's mother. I came today to say thank you. Because of you, I set boundaries with my daughter. Last week, I refused to babysit all summer, and for the first time, she said, 'I understand, Mom.' I held her hand, choked up. I didn't teach anyone. I just told my story. But that story," she said, "taught more people than you realize." I glanced at Lila. She stood at the corner, hands on her belly, quietly wiping tears. But this time I knew. They weren't tears of embarrassment or shame. They were tears of self-respect when a woman learns that love doesn't equal endurance. In the crowd, I suddenly spotted Paige. She wore a simple dress, hair tied up, a stack of books in her arms. When she saw me, she smiled shyly. "I came to help sell books." "Consider it a personal amends." I laughed and handed her a copy and a pen. "Then sign here as honorary assistant." Paige's eyes widened. "Really? I've forgiven you. Forgiveness is a big gift you give yourself first." She smiled, for the first time without the stiff edges. As afternoon faded, golden light washed over the yard. Aunt Evelyn came over with a glass of wine and said softly, "Honor is back at our table, Sandra, and it smells better than your pies." I laughed and squeezed her hand. Maybe the best dessert is the one baked with self-respect. That night, after the guests left, Brandon helped me clean up. I carefully wrapped a copy of the book in a brown envelope and sealed it. On the front I wrote, "For Carmen, who made me believe every woman can rewrite her own story. Your name is in the acknowledgments." I slipped the envelope into the mailbox, then looked at the yard. The warm string lights still glowed over the empty chairs. In that light, I saw myself not a tired 69-year-old, but someone who finally signs her own life. The next morning, Linda called. "Mrs. Sandra, we just got an email from a local magazine. They want to run an Axnell interview with you about women after 60 and the art of boundaries." I laughed. I spent a lifetime with no one asking where my boundaries were, and now they want me to talk about them. "Life really does come full circle," Linda said, "because you turned the quiet into a voice. That's the power of old age with self-respect." I hung up and sat by the window. Morning light fell across my desk, glinting off the cover that read, "Warm Kitchen and Dignity." I laid my hand on it and whispered, "Maybe at last I've found the most important recipe of my life. Love with self-respect and live under your own name." And in that moment, old age didn't feel like sunset. It felt like the sunrise of a new chapter, where every woman, at any age, has the right to keep writing her story without asking anyone's permission. On the day baby Eleanor Grace was born, the sky was softly gray, but sunlight broke through the clouds. I brought a pot of hot chicken soup, set it on the black hospital windowsill, knocked lightly, and stepped back. When Brandon came out, I said, "The soup's enough for 2 meals. I'll go home and come back tomorrow." He smiled, gratitude mixed with a little surprise. "You don't want to come in?" "Not for now. This is when you and your wife learn to be parents. I'm just a guest, just like we agreed." I felt Brandon squeeze my hand. "You really mean what you say." "Lucky for me," I laughed. "Otherwise, Kitchen and Dignity would lose its value right away." That first week, I stopped by at noon, exactly 1 hour. I rinsed a few bottles, folded a few towels, then left. No overnights, no stepping in. Each time I was about to go, I wrote a small note. "You're doing great." Remember, parents learn by mistakes and by love. I didn't expect that keeping my distance would make Brandon and Lila respect me even more. No more sudden, "Mom, can you watch the baby for a bit?" Instead, they texted in advance. "Mom, Sandra, do you have time for Thursday tea?" No favors, just flowers and weather. I laughed. No favors, that line has become a family slogan now. One evening in early October, I visited and Lila held Eleanor in her arms. The room smelled of warm milk and lavender. "Mom, Sandra," she said softly, "I want to say something." I sat down and smiled. "What is it?" "I finished my first round of therapy. My doctor says I made real progress. I learned that if I want help, I have to ask first. I can't assume." I was silent, my throat tight. She looked at me, eyes wet. "I used to be scared of you because you were so capable, so steady. I wanted to prove I wasn't weak. But I realized true strength is knowing how to apologize and ask for help, not pretending you don't need anyone." I touched her shoulder gently. "You know, I spent half my life learning the opposite, that love doesn't mean taking it all. Thank you for learning earlier than I did." We both laughed, and Eleanor whimpered. Lila soothed her while I stood and stepped toward the window. The warm light reflected on the glass, showing 2 women, one young, one old, both relearning how to love without chains. After that, we agreed to keep Thursday tea time a standing weekly date. No money talk, no household talk, no favors. Just the 3 of us, a pot of chamomile tea, a few cookies, and ordinary stories, the weather, recipes, neighborhood news. "Once," Brandon said, "funny how when we don't need anything from each other, it's so easy to talk," I answered. "That's when family love is freed from the weight of obligation." One afternoon, Brandon asked me to meet him at the park. Leaves covered the path in yellow. He pushed the stroller slowly while I sat on a bench watching Eleanor sleep. After a while, Brandon said quietly, "Mom, I want you to know I'm proud of you. I used to feel ashamed when people said you made a scene at the wedding. But now I get it. If you hadn't said no that day, I might still not understand respect." I smiled and slipped my arm around his shoulder. "I'm proud of you too. Not because you're successful, but because you know how to make things right. That's enough." In that moment, I saw my husband William as if he were sitting across from us, smiling in contentment. That night, I opened my laptop and wrote the final chapter for the new edition of Warm Kitchen and Dignity. Sometimes one little no can save the rest of your life. Not no love, but no to forgetting yourself. Not refusing to help, but choosing to help by choice. Family doesn't need sacrifice to prove itself, it needs respect to survive. I saved the file, closed the laptop, and poured myself a small glass of wine. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees like soft applause behind the night. A month later, we held our first family dinner since Eleanor was born. A long table with white linen and candlelight. There were Mitchell, Carol, the mother who once texted me thanks after that wedding, Aunt Evelyn, Carmen, Brandon, Lila, and me. Mitchell raised his glass. "I used to think old age meant stepping back, but Sandra showed me it's when we stand tall so our children know where to look." The table was quiet for a few seconds, then the soft clink of glasses. I looked around at faces that had once clashed, felt shame, and relearned how to love. A new circle, built on respect. In the center, I placed an old photo of William in a silver frame. He wore a suit, his eyes kind. I whispered, "See, love, I kept our family's honor." Evelyn heard me and squeezed my hand. "He must be so proud, Sandra." I nodded, eyes stinging. Lila raised her glass, voice trembling but steady. "Thank you, Mom Sandra, for giving me a second chance, not from debt or shame, but from real family." Brandon turned to his wife and smiled, then took my hand. I looked at the baby sleeping peacefully in her bassinet, my heart as calm as gentle waves on an evening sea. Late that night, after everyone left, I sat alone in the living room, warm light falling on the family photo on the wall. I took out my notebook and wrote the final line. Some families fall apart from too many yeses. Others come back to life with one well-timed no. I closed the notebook and smiled. In my heart, no anger, no regret, only wholeness. If you've stayed with me to the very end, thank you from the heart of someone who once forgot her own worth, then relearned how to love without losing herself. I don't know where you're watching from, maybe a small town, a quiet house without the kids, or just a phone on your kitchen table. But if you saw a piece of yourself in this story being taken for granted, a boundary crossed, or a no you once wished you'd said, please pause for a second and smile at yourself. You deserve respect, love, and to be heard. Tell me where you're from and what part of this story touched you most. Write a comment so we can remind each other that age never makes a heart less worthy. It only deepens love and makes self-respect shine brighter. If this story warmed you, please like, subscribe, and stay for the next one. Every bit of support, every comment you leave helps stories of family, dignity, and awakening find their way to more hearts.